I just wanted to start by saying that Enable Scotland, primarily we do support people with learning disabilities, which is obviously a very specific type of disability. However, for the purposes of this seminar, we're using the term disability very generally, and that can mean any type of disability, whether it's a learning disability or more of a physical disability. The same principles quite often apply. So just for the purposes today of our discussion, we'll be taking disability as a more general term. So today the topic of the seminar is inclusion, and just to start off, we'll give you an idea of what inclusion is all about. To give you a little bit of background information, there are a lot of people with disabilities currently who experience social isolation. There are a lot of reasons behind this, and we've just kind of picked out a few here to highlight. One of the main things that's happened over the past decade or so is that there's been a huge move from people who were getting support in hospitals and in long-stay hospitals or in residential accommodation, who have now gone into getting care in a community setting. So people who are moving into their own homes or perhaps have shared tenancies with other people who also are receiving support. So it's much more community-based now. Unfortunately, the way Linda likes to put it is that no one warned the community about this, and everyone thinks it's all well and good, it's fantastic that people are getting the opportunity to live in a community, but living in a community is very different from becoming an active member of the community. So one of the outcomes that's occurred here is that there's a large dependence still on the people that support people with learning disabilities and other types of disabilities as well. And so although people are living in the community, they're still very dependent on their members of staff that are there as part of the team that supports them. And I should probably emphasize that this is paid staff, so people that actually are employed to work on behalf of the person to support them. And finally, the third reason that people are experiencing social isolation, although they're in communities now, is that the communities that they're living in aren't totally inclusive at this point, so there's still a lot of work to be done. So to give you a definition of what we mean by inclusion, I've taken this definition from MenCap because I think it really kind of illustrates very well what inclusion is. It means that everyone has an equal opportunity to take part in community-based activities, and adaptations are made to make this possible. Changes are made to meet everyone's needs. So what that means is that, take for example, there's a particular arts and crafts class that someone with a physical disability would like to access, but unfortunately they aren't able to access it because of maybe physical barriers that would get in the way of them being able to participate. So in order to fully include the person in that class, they need to make a change. They need to find a way to make it possible for that person to physically get into it. Although it involves a lot more than that. That's a small example of one way that inclusion might work, but it does go deeper than that as well. And to illustrate that a bit further, I'll talk a little bit about the difference between inclusion and integration. Integration is also a very important thing. However, it doesn't actually take into consideration people's individual needs. So integration usually would mean where there's a service or some sort of a community-based service like a club or a class where they would accept people with different types of abilities, but would not take into regard what sort of changes might need to be made to make it more comfortable for these individuals. And Linda's got an excellent story to demonstrate the difference between inclusion and integration, so I'll just hand you over to her now.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
All right. Well, I want to give you an illustration. It's an illustration of a lady who was invited somewhere, but she wasn't included, and that's the difference. several people had said to her, "Do come along to this social club of ours. You're very welcome." So she did. But this lady had some disability, problems getting around, and sometimes had problems picking up a cup and things like this, but not very much more than that. However, she decided to go to this social club. So happened I went the very same day that she was there, and I was observing something. This lady had been invited, all right, but she wasn't included. She was sitting on her own somewhere. Nobody thought to come and have a chat, invited to talk perhaps with their little social group. Everybody was too busy with their own friends, talking amongst themselves, to even consider this lady, who had probably struggled to get there, struggled to get onto the bus, struggled to get herself ready, and struggled to get into the place in the first place, and was there because somebody invited her. Now during this time, somebody else came in with a few social problems, probably some mental health problems, I don't know. When she came in, she was left to one side as well, and the two of them were left to get on with it. Later on, I decided in fact that I was going to go there every now and again and try and give this lady some support myself. So I made the big mistake of saying I'd go on this trip they were having. And when we went on that trip, nobody thought this lady couldn't walk very far. They thought she was okay. They'd seen her around Stirling, so they thought, oh, it's okay. She'll be all right. We've invited her. Isn't that enough? But no, it wasn't. I struggled for 2 hours trying to help that lady to get from place to place. And I've got a crutch, and it's hard for me, and it was hard for her. Nowhere on that trip, nowhere in the cafe, in the shops, nowhere was there any help. Nobody had thought that perhaps she needed a wheelchair. Now some of you are saying, well, that's just too bad. I thought it was very bad. Several weeks later, this lady said to me, I really can't cope. I can't cope in the community. I can't cope out there. Nobody's really interested, and I feel so lonely. That lady made the decision to go into residential care. She was only in her 50s. She's ended up somewhere in a care home. If only people had included that lady as well as inviting her.